and scholars, friends, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, watching, listening, skills, learning skills, students and scholars of IELTS, literature and language. Basically, there are 4 modules of learning English. One is listening, speaking, reading and writing. In all these 4 modules, reading is known as the toughest module and which is the commonest module. How we can make it easy? What is the concept of reading skills in language? Today we will learn the modern classroom environment, an overview. The classroom today is a fluid space. Even as you all pursue a distance education program, you will be receiving certain lectures in your designated study centers or through online platforms. Regardless of regular or distance education, online or offline modality, a classroom as such is not a site for perpetuating under undemocratic life. It is not a space for addressing social power. It is not a platform for the display and transmission of the power and knowledge of the educator. It has become a potent site for addressing issues of injustice, inequality, and inadequacy. It has evolved as a very plausible field for initiating process of reflection, research, and research as a subversive space for empowering the culturally marginalized and economically disfranchised learners with unbiased knowledge. This can primarily be achieved through reading and discussion, since both provide a multiplicity of perspectives and plethora of insights. Today, an effective language lesson must integrate primarily through reading and explanation the content, language and culture into learning. The 5 C's of an effective lesson in today's language classroom are content, communication, cognition, culture, context. In an article by Michelle P. Breen titled "The Social Context for Language Learning, a Neglected Situation," Beam highlights the study of classroom language, learning from two different perspectives, namely research and teaching. In particular, he interrogates two propensities, he interrogates two perspectives. What are the specific contribution of the classroom to the process of language development? In what ways might the teacher exploit the social reality of the classroom as a source for the teaching of language? Now, considering whether you meet you whether you meet your professors regularly in a regular classroom, or you meet them in planned sessions in the distance learning mode. A common answer to both the above question is that this can be achieved by initiating in the students a culture of reading. There exists a very intricate relationship between the social process of learners and their individual psychological processes, and this learning can occur twice: first at the social level and next at the individual level. First, when it is between people, interpsychological, and thereafter when it occurs within the learner, intrapsychological, in the kind of a sociocultural intercourse. Reading directly influences the psychological development of the lecturer, of the learner, by continuously integrating the learning experiences of each individual with the group as a whole. It is through a consideration of the expectations, values, and beliefs of the learner that the learning group progresses and the learning environment is moderated. There are various metaphors comparing the classroom situation to an experimental laboratory or a discourse podium, and even to a coral garden. The first metaphor of the classroom as experimental laboratory is derived from the premise of Stephen Krashen's second language acquisition theory. In order to explain the classroom as experimental laboratory, one must understand the primary function of language classroom as manifested by the correlation between exposure to a linguistic input through reading and the final learning outcome. The value and purpose of the classroom can produce an optimum input for the reader by providing accurate and relevant information as well as holistic knowledge. As you attend the session in your designated study centers, your tutors will help you with useful pointers, recap of important ideas, and suggestion on how to best utilize the textual resources you have received in both the regular and the distance learning context. The teacher or the tutor is perceived as a surrogate experimental psychologist on whose shoulders lies the responsibility of facilitating comprehension for individual learners and reinforcing positive learning behaviors accordingly by encouraging the learner to read, the distinct process in which an acquisition of a language is through a continuous process of absorbing new facts and retaining the information or skills via formal instructions holds true in the metaphor as proposed by the Stephen Krashen 1982. In the second metaphor of the classroom as discourse, the primary focus is on classroom-oriented research which intends to understand the discourse of classroom communication. It shows the teachers and learners and active readers agreed with each other, whereby the classroom activity and inputs can be explored as a text through reading and discussion. This metaphor reveals much of the specific interaction patterns going on in the in the particular language learning situation, such as teacher-learner negotiation once a passage or text is read. The third metaphor, which explains the classroom as choral garden, derives from Milwaukee's classical studies of Trobriand Island cultures, describing in choral garden and their magic. Malinowski 1935. This metaphor articulates the premise that in order to understand a language classroom, observation alone on the surface level of the classroom discourse is inadequate. It is neither practical nor possible to understand the culture of the text just by learning the language or understanding the language by studying the culture and dialects through reading and discourse. The principle of the classroom as a choral garden seeks to emphasize the importance of understanding the classroom situation, which can result in increasing learner engagement, motivation, and participation for the betterment of the language learning through reading with a highlighted purpose. It highlights the urgency and necessity of perceiving the classroom as a real place with its own culture to help us exploit its complexity as a resource for language learning, especially through reading and interpretation. There are 8 essential features of the culture of such a language classroom in which learning is achieved through reading and elaboration. This can be perceived as being interactive, differentiated, collective, highly normative, asymmetrical, inherently conservative, jointly constructed, immediately significant. In the course of explaining his proposition, Breen articulates the definition of the classroom situation in the form of metaphors that can provide directions for the exploration and examination within the current language learning process, thus suggesting a possible feature investigation for the culture of the language classroom will be more for a revelation rather than just identifying it is metaphor in the attempt to relate Bring metaphor to the contemporary reality of classroom situation. Bring metaphor could be extended to include the classroom as terrarium, where terrarium is a miniature version of an actual ecosystem similar to Breen's metaphor depicting the coal gardens with a collection of small plants growing in a transparent container. Reading thus become an essential skill to negotiate heterogeneous variety of the classroom and also to provide effective student centered learning. Developing reading skills. There are four major English language skills which must be developed for complete and holistic language learning and language acquisition. These are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. While all four are equally vital and important for the lecturer across disciplines, reading is an indispensable part of the learning process, and every education program considers it is a priority among the key goals. Subsequently, the development of powerful reading skills in learners is essential and indispensable. It is through reading that students augment their vocabulary and acquire fresh knowledge of life and the world. Reading is also the primary prerequisite for one to improve in terms of comprehension, spelling, vocabulary, and writing. If not addressed accurately, if not addressed adequately, poor reading skills can adversely impact the performance of learner across a wide variety of curricular disciplines and have a negative impact on both self-motivation and self-esteem. Reading begins with mastering pre-literacy skills, including learning the alphabet and achieving phonemic awareness. This is followed closely by phonetic and phonemic instruction through human or technological sources, and this imparts to learners the skills of mapping, recognition, how to match sounds to letters, and pronounce words loudly and clearly, understanding the subtle differences between long and short sounds. Vowels and consonants. As a beginner reader gains familiarity with the language and acquires more vocabulary. The process of mapping recognition of sound to word accelerate through the process of full word recognition or sight reading. This can be encouraged through direct instruction in high frequency vocabulary or even multi-usage vocabulary. When learners move to higher levels of linguistic familiarity, they are motivated and guided to achieve holistic comprehension through reading, and this includes understanding complex text and processing more information in shorter amounts of time. Being a fast and efficient reader is important not just for classroom based lessons but also for satisfying requirements of assignment and performing well in standardized exams. However, learners develop and improve their reading skills at different speeds and thereby exhibit different levels of fluency and comprehension. Learner may be considered to be ready to further develop the skill of reading accurately and appropriately when they identify and differentiate both vowel and consonant sounds in English, associate vowel and consonant sounds with letters, identify and differentiate among consonant combinations, identify and articulate the vowel combinations, identify rhyming words even when spelled with a different letter patterns, identify upper and lower case letter as well as italics and the basic pronunciation marks in a text. Achievement of the above indicates that the student has acquired the basic skills of reading. However, there are three common difficulties encountered during the acquisition of reading skills. Challenges of decoding. Challenges of decoding. Challenge of decoding. This refers to the process of reading and pronouncing words. Decoding occurs when learners are able to put sounds to letters in order to pronounce written language. It's common for non-native readers to face acute difficulty and confusion when they encounter new or unfamiliar expressions, and even when they come across homonyms or the issue of different sounds made by the same vowel in different words. Inadequate or faulty comprehension. Reading involves a process of negotiation from recognition of letters and words to understanding the meanings of phrases, sentences, and paragraphs. When a non-native reader encounters vocabulary he or she does not know or does not recognize due to inaccurate decoding, he or she is likely to skip and progress to that part of the text which is simple and familiar. The more blanks in the line of text, the more difficult is the complete comprehension and the more cognitively challenging and frustrating the reading task becomes. To overcome this, the non-native readers need to identify the gist of the passage and highlight the main ideas along with specific details and even infer. Next is speed. When learners expand their vocabulary, they recognize more words by sight and the process of reading is accelerated. With copious amounts of reading, the learner's exposure to unfamiliar terms is more likely to increase. Quite often, the context in which these new words are found gives readers many of the clues they need to grasp the meaning. Reading is a cognitively demanding task, and absorbing so much into information in the mind while continuing to process text can exhaust non-native readers. Thus, the speed of reading must be moderated by the readers according to their state of proficiency. The reading spelling correspondence. English is full of silent letters. English is full of silent letters and unexpected sounds. Many a time the learner is compelled to simply memorize the spelling of a word in order to recognize its written form in the future. Another reason why English is not the easiest language for initial readers is because of the lack of exact correspondence between learner and sounds, between letter and sounds. In other words, there is more than one way to spell the same sound. This causes acute confusion and extreme difficulty for non-native English users. Classification of reading techniques. Reading can be classified into three kinds: extensive reading, intensive reading, and old reading. Extensive reading refers to culture and practice of reading through cultivating the habit of copious reading. In this approach, there is no overt focus on teaching reading or implementing reading within an instructional setting. The best way for learner to improve their reading skills is to read a variety and a large quantity of comprehensible material according to their respective levels of linguistic proficiency. Intensive reading refers to the practice of reading skills in an instructional setting. Readers are exposed to a variety of materials and assigned activities such as answering comprehension questions on the passage they have read. Learners need to look for critical information in the passage they are reading and make inferences, etc. Intensive reading is instruction based and forms the core of improving reading skills. Use oral reading does attract attention in multiple learning contexts. It is an integral part of reading, especially in non-native English language context. Reading readiness exercises. Before reading, one must ensure that the learner is ready to read. This can be accomplished by initiating the process of what is commonly known as reading readiness. Reading readiness exercise enable learners to recognize and read the letters and words, and thereby mapping recognition is solidified in the mind. Reading readiness exercises may or may not use linguistic materials, but must in every way possible be facilitating and familiar to the learners. The learning outcome of reading readiness exercise is to help foster a congenial atmosphere for learning, reading, and to develop motivation and interest towards reading. Some of the reading readiness exercises are visual discrimination, auditory discrimination, memory training. Visual discrimination, directions like same, different, top, bottom, middle, first, second and last, etc., referring to objects. Letters and words. are presented in these exercises. In English, for example, the students need to distinguish between P and Q, P and K, between D and P, etc. Names and shapes of the letters of the English alphabet, different forms of the same letter, upper and lower case, etc. The ability to tell whether two letters or groups of letters are the same or different are all focused in the process of visual discrimination. Some possible discriminations can be checked through questions like which letter is at the top, at the bottom and in the middle of the page, or what object is the first, the second and the last, or any of the objects, letters or words the same as the one in the box, or even pair the capital and small letters as provided in the examples given in the text. Auditory discrimination. Although the auditory discrimination exercises are part of the preparation for listening, these need to be used as reading readiness exercises also. This is important for those learners who hear or repeat a sound persistently incorrectly. Many learners mispronounce the j sound for z sound and say zero instead of zero instead of zero. There is a close relationship connecting the auditory image of the word, its reading and reproduction in writing. Each word has its own auditory image, and this auditory image needs to be retrieved correctly in the reading process to avoid its mispronunciation, misreading and misspelling. Some possible exercises are minimal pairs like bit and beat, initial sounds of successive words, rhyme words, similar or parallel sentences, etc. Memory training. This training helps learners in mental retention for a short but significant period of time of fact and data in a text while reading or even after reading. Some such exercises that you are likely to encounter are: repeat the first three sentences of the first paragraph after completing a reading. Sequentially narrate in brief the chronological order of events in a story that has been read. Name as many of the objects from memory as possible after a picture has been shown related to a story that will be read. The reading process. As you attend the session at your study center, you will find that there are 4 steps followed in a reading lesson. Introduction. Here the tutor explains the purpose for reading the selected textual extract or portion and gives you all a setting for the text to be read. Then the tutor presents a background of appropriate information for the text to be read and select as well as introduces the new vocabulary necessary to comprehend the main ideas in the text. The reading. This is generally an oral exercise for the beginners, usually consisting of listening to the passage read aloud or listening and following along. Later on, reading is procedural and repetitive or slow and silent. Comprehension task. After one or more readings are done, certain questions are set on the passage studied in order to elicit factual or inferential information based upon your understanding of the textual exercise. Textual extract, review and related exercise. These may consist of summary, review, stylistic analysis, practice writing and other formative and summative exercises to enhance your understanding and to evaluate your ability of comprehension and identification of silent points of the reading passage. During a reading lesson, in your sessions at the study center, the following steps should be carefully followed. In the study center, as the tutor reads aloud, you should listen attentively and follow the text as the lines on page are progressively pronounced or spoken aloud. The tutor will occasionally stop to highlight the meanings of words in between the reading and engage in discussion on specific portions during gaps in reading. The tutor will read and encourage you all to repeat, listen, and read along, following his or her pronunciation, and this proceed to make you all highlight important portions. The tutor will elicit questions or conduct a discussion on stylistic or grammatical points of importance. The tutor will generate and supervise discussion on theme and content. As all of this happens, you all are encouraged to either read silently or practice reading aloud individually with the tutor's permission. These types of questions may follow from the tutor for discussion. Informative or factual, those which begin with what, when, where, who, how many, etc. Inferential, those questions which may be answered by evaluating the information given, such as did the hero feel scared by the villain's intimidating manner and aggressive threats. Interpretative questions relating to the author's opinion and the reader's judgment about the style and content of the text. Stages. Stage 1 of the reading process, elementary reading. In the first stage, which is usually referred to as elementary reading, the learners are taught the process of associating the letters of the English alphabet with their relevant sounds in appropriate context. In this process, they discover the relationship between the alphabet and the spoken language. Readers are given sets of simple words, phrases, and sentences with the focus being on one or two letters and their combinations. They are introduced to the correspondence between the individual letters and their combination in slow and graded steps. They come to internalize in an inductive manner, in an inductive manner, the possibilities of sound values for each letter or combination of letters. This leads to an emphasis upon decoding graphic information from the words, phrases, and sentences. With their newfound familiarity and ability to form correspondences, learners then begin to read new combination of vocabulary and sentences structures. They are now able to accurately predict the sound systems represented by the letters and their word formation combination in various contexts. There may be various types of elementary readers ranging from a child or an illiterate to an adult second or foreign language learner of English who is not proficient in the target language. He or she may be highly educated or a moderately educated person in his or her own native language. At the beginning level, irrespective of the age and background, the focus must be mainly on the mechanics of reading. The beginner needs to learn about the relationship and the correspondence between the letters of the alphabet and the spoken language. Before reading skills are developed at the beginner's level, learners must note and follow those guidelines. The tutor or the instructor must have adequate knowledge of the academic and linguistic background of the beginner, reader, or non-native speaker. The reading task involves decoding the system of abstract symbols to discover its relation to the spoken language system, and thus association and correspondence must be imbibed and imparted correctly. The time taken to master the practice of association and correspondence will differ with age, maturity, previous experience, and other social factors. With primary emphasis on mechanics, learners can excel in the mechanics of reading in a few months. Words which express familiar meanings or meanings which can be recognized words which express familiar meanings or meanings which can be recognized are retained in memory and thus must be chosen judiciously. The choice of words must focus on the text to be studied. At this stage, such words must be avoided as those which may have the same spelling in English as well as in the learner's language but are read differently. Stage 2 of the reading process, intermediate reading. The intermediate reading stage fosters interest in reading and develops the actual reading skill practiced throughout the learner's lives beyond mastering the association between letters and sounds. Intermediate readers read silently and confidently predict the sound values of letters and their combinations, and they begin to read for academic purposes. Emphasis here is on developing additional reading skills towards reading with a purpose. In the intermediate reading level, the learners progress to reading advanced English language passages with the emphasis being on overall comprehension and retention. The focus on the development of study skills and textual organization. At the intermediate stage of reading, learners should read such content that introduce them subtly to the grammatical and stylistic conventions of English. Reading should be done in a way that through these passages, learners can internalize the grammatical structures of English. These structures of English are linked to the reading process and the goals of reading. For example, learners may understand through reading practice that certain phrases predict the transition in information discussed in the reading material. In the stage of following, pre-reading guidelines should be followed. The learner should read and examine the title and the headings for each section and attempt to predict what the passage will have as its central theme. The learner should read the first and the last paragraphs and first sentence of each paragraph to attempt to predict the focus of the passage. The learner should read the title and skim the passage to circle all the words that may have a connection with the title. The learner should scan the passage and highlight all the words that are unfamiliar. The learner should then do a second reading of the passage and guess or conjecture the meanings of these unfamiliar words in the context of the passage. However, if the meanings are still elusive, then the words must be looked up in a dictionary. The learner should try to think about and analyze the nature of the content in the passage after reading fiction or non-fiction, etc. The learner should also contemplate after reading why would somebody read this passage for information or pleasure. The learner should try to tell a story about the background of the reading passage or create an alternate ending in the passage in a conversation with friends after reading is complete. In the intermediate stage, several intermediate reading skills can be acquired through these procedures. They are reading with incomplete information, organizing for careful reading by skimming and scanning, organizing information, reading critically, developing effective personal reading strategies, establishing effective and differentially paced reading for different kinds of reading. In the reading process at the intermediate stage of reading, the success of a learner depends on a lot on the initiative he or she is willing to take and the positive attitude that is inculcated towards reading. The learner should recognize the pivotal role reading plays in improving their direction and pronunciation. Even it helps them internalize the structures of English. The learners should discover for themselves how rigorous reading habits help them enhance their linguistic and academic performance in English in a holistic way. Reading materials are easily available and a plethora of daily relevant and engaging materials in our surroundings can be used to our advantage in order to understand better both culture and literature. If the reading materials chosen are relevant and fulfill the learner's needs, they will help develop an interest in reading and also improve their optimal reading speeds. This is also another focus at the intermediate stage of the reading process. Stage 3 of the reading process, advanced reading. In the intermediate stage, most learners are content with their achievement of personal reading as it is both fluent and purposeful compared to the elementary stage of the reading process. However, reading is a continuing process, and despite their feelings of accomplishment, learners must necessarily move on to the reading of authentic text for specific purpose. Stories retold as well as abridged and adapted versions are focused in the intermediate level, but at the advanced level, originals are studied and exhaustive reading becomes important. Advanced reading is therefore a stage of the reading process that is based on a wide variety of authentic text and on the task that present how a learner would negotiate these texts in real life situations rather than a conventional assessment exercise. The aim of advanced reading is to go beyond more understanding and delve deeper into layers for meaning, references, and suggestions implicit in a text. Learners need to form individual opinions about the text or express personal responses to the text in terms of interpretation, evaluation, criticism, and application of other contexts or disciplines or situations. Advanced reading leads to complex thinking and simply a preliminary step towards further learning of various skills and purposes. Reading through stories, short stories, short stories as a relaxing break from routine, lengthy and academic text, as well as interesting lesson exercises. Selection of short stories for reading by adult learners is different from selection of materials by children because the former might lose interest if the text is too simple, and the latter may do the same if the text is too difficult and abstruse. While adult readers select appropriate short stories, the following factors come into play. Complexity of vocabulary. The story should have enough words that the majority of the readers are able to understand, while at the same time include sufficiently complex words which they can decode. Simplicity of language. The story should not have too many idioms or arcane and archaic language, as that might also be too difficult and disinteresting. Relevance of theme and content. The content should be relevant in such a way that topics of relationships, business situations, family life, or every even something personal and intimate can be related to by the readers culturally and professionally. Potential for discussion. The story must provide interesting themes or discussion questions, keeping in mind the contemporary situation and critical thinking. Developing reading skills. Reading is a multifaceted cognitive process of decoding printed or written words to get the meaning. It involves word recognition, language processing, comprehension, and fluency. Many students consider reading HOER because they connect it only with learning complex information from textbooks prescribed in the curriculum. However, reading is a basic skill that we use every day in a variety of situations. For instance, looking at the notice board to find an advertisement for a vacancy would require you to quickly locate the relevant information and reject the irrelevant extract the required facts. Additionally, reading a newspaper, a magazine, or a blog not only requires you to read the content but also get a more detailed comprehension than just being able to get the gist. Thus, be it for understanding instructions on a medicine bottle or for filling out an application form, reading is an important fundamental skill needed to function actively in the society today as an informed citizen and even for conducting activities in our personal lives. Let us consider the various kinds of reading materials that one usually comes across in different situations in real life. Literary text like novels, short stories, poems, plays, biographies, essays, diaries, etc. Text for communication skills, text for communication like emails, messages, letters, postcards, telegrams, etc. Business or work related text like forms, instructions, catalogs, brochures, reports, reviews, rules and regulations, notices, notes, minutes of meetings, etc. Media related text like newspapers, magazines, outline articles, editorials, blogs, pamphlets, advertisements, etc. Graphics, graphic text like graffiti or comic strips, posters, warnings, road signs, maps, etc. Academic text like textbooks, handbooks, guidebooks, dictionaries, phrase books, etc. Other miscellaneous types like recipes, menu, price list, etc. In addition to this, reading is an active skill. It entails guessing, forecasting, anticipating, checking, and introspection. It is because while reading, our eyes do not follow each word of the text, word after word. This holds true especially for efficient readers. Many words and expressions are simply skipped as they are read. Also, more than what one finds in the text, what one brings to the text by predicting is usually more important for reading quickly. Therefore, one should first consider the known elements before proceeding to interpret unknown aspects of the text, whether it is vocabulary or ideas. This is a global approach to reading a text and would involve the following steps: study of the layout, title, length, pictures, typeface of the text, making hypotheses, anticipation about the content, and deciphering function process of the text, confirming the hypothesis by considering what one is cognizant of in such text types in the first reading. Second reading for further confirmation through skimming. It includes making more detailed prediction or revision of thought. To give you more insight into developing better reading skills, this module will briefly discuss the different types of reading, the strategies of reading efficiently, and tips to improve your reading rate to read faster. Now go through all the sections and answer the questions given in Check Your Progress. This will help you to remember the important points. We do hope you enjoy working through this unit. Types of reading. Any type of reading that is done is usually done for two main reasons or purpose. Reading for pleasure. Reading for pleasure is when we read because of our own free will, expecting to derive intellectual satisfaction and joy. It is also called reading for recreation and is mostly done voluntarily and enthusiastically, although it can also be done on someone else's suggestion. But we do it mostly as a habit at a time and place of our choice. There have been number of research studies to validate the benefit of reading for pleasure. Some of the benefits are improved of vocabulary, spellings or grammar due to incidental learning, better language competence, improved problem solving capacity, better social attitudinal communication comprehensions, and better average academic scores. Additionally, many studies suggest that reading for pleasure improves general knowledge. It also enhances understanding of other cultures, self-confidence, improves decision-making power, as well as provides greater insights into human nature. Reading for information. When we read or common workplace document to find out some information or gain knowledge from the content, it is called reading for information. In academic or official context, this type of reading is most applicable and involves detailed understanding of the content with requisite personal responses like summarizing, discussing the main ideas, or answering the questions. Irrespective of the purpose mentioned above, the general aims of developing reading skills are as follows: to be able to read without help on one's own in real life outside the classroom, to be able to read unfamiliar text that one has never tackled before, to be able to read authentic text. Authentic text such as articles, blogs, novels, etc. are written for real world purposes to perform, inform, explain, guide, document, or even entertain. To be able to read different text with appropriate speed instead of plodding through all the text at the same speed. To be able to read silently, as we seldom need to read aloud in real life. To be able to read with adequate understanding to suit our purpose. Despite being a basic or essential skill for academic success, reading is often overlooked by many students who focus more on developing writing skills. Thus, an important question to consider when we focus on improving reading skills is, how do we read? A good reader varies his or her speed of reading according to the nature and purpose of reading. Such a reader would also change the attitude, approach, and technique according to the type of the text. For instance, the way one reads the direction to assemble the parts of a doll or an airplane, or instruction to bake a cake, would be very different from the way one reads a legal document to fully and understand all the legal provisions. Similarly, one would also employ a different method to read a bestseller on journey. A huge mistake many students commit is that they read all types of text by plodding through the written materials word by word. One must avoid this, should be flexible in using varying speed and techniques of reading. Some main techniques of reading are as follows: skimming. When we quickly read the text to glean the gist of it, it is called skimming. In this technique, one goes through the reading material to sift the essence of the text, to understand the organization of ideas and the tone or the intention of the writer. Thus, it needs glancing rapidly through the text. We often do it when we skim through the newspaper to see if there is anything worth reading in detail, or even when we quickly browse through the pages of a book to find out its subject matter. Scanning. When we specially dart through a text to find particular information such as a name, a date, etc. It is called scanning. In this technique, one often does not follow the linearity of the passage. The eyes are simply allowed to wander over the text until we spot what we are looking for it. It also requires us to reject or pass over irrelevant information. Thus, the purpose of this technique is very limited. We use this technique while checking out table of contents, or while trying to find a person's telephone number in the telephone directory. Skim and scanning. When we quickly read the text to glean the gist of it, it is called skimming. In this technique, one goes through the reading material to sift the essence of the text, to understand the organization of the ideas and the tones or the intention of the writer. Thus, it needs glancing rapidly through the text. We often do it when we skim through the newspaper to see if there is anything worth reading in detail, or even when we quickly browse through the pages of a book to find out its subject matter. These two techniques of reading are not mutually exclusive. At times, both are blends for quick and efficient reading. For instance, one may skim through an article first just to decide if it is worth reading, then later, during second or third reading, one may scan it to note down a figure or name which we need to remember particularly. Now we must also learn the difference between the two types of reading that are often employed in the context of studying. They are described traditionally as intensive and extensive reading, indicating different procedures and purposes. These are also called reading for accuracy and reading for fluency respectively. Intensive reading. When we read text of short length to extract specific information, it is called intensive reading. This type of reading demands accuracy as we read for details. This requires reading short passages and then examining it closely and in great detail with an aim to obtain a thorough understanding of the text. This is often undertaken under guidance of a teacher. This method improves one's power of judgment, discriminative reasoning based on interpretation and appreciation, as one pays attention to the logical development of ideas and arguments and even the writing style used in the text. It also helps to improve our concentration level. Extensive reading involves reading longer text, usually for one's own pleasure, without bothering to check every unknown word. The aim of this type of reading is to train ourselves to read fluently without the aid of teacher. According to Professor Stephen Krashen, reading for pleasure, extensive reading is the major source of our reading competence. Our vocabulary and our ability to handle complex grammatical construction. For this type of reading, a wide variety of interesting material which is readily and easily accessible in language is chosen for reading, which could be artistic, political, social, or even scientific. As this is a fluency activity, it mainly involves global comprehension, understanding the general meaning. To inculcate the habit of extensive reading, one must make reading a part of daily routine and read any book for at least 30 minutes at a stretch. Setting a time, a place, and deciding the number of books that you would like to finish reading in a given time can be very beneficial. Gentlemen, students, scholars, teachers, trainers, the most honorable President Prime Minister Sen Dr. Narendra Modi ji, availability of respected ministers and doctors, personalities, those who are listening carefully. It is really nice time, nice place, nice action listening with 100% present sense of mind. It is really a pleasuresome moment that you are enjoying the reading. While skimming, scanning, or zooming are important reading strategies that enable us to get a drill of what the author is saying or the gist of content. Yet, as college students, you are required to do study reading for better academic performance. You need to do immense amount of reading in details for your course, and or you need to immense amount of reading in detail for your courses and are expected to remember the concepts and ideas in the books prescribed in the expected. Remember the concept and ideas in the books prescribed in the curriculum. This requires engagement with the text on your part. It requires you to be able to read carefully and thoughtfully. For this purpose, there are number of strategies. A few that you can start using easily have been suggested below. Strategy 1, text marking. Strategy 2, writing questions. Strategy 3, associating graphics with ideas. Strategy 4, summarizing a paragraph or chapter. Let us discuss them one by one. Text marking. While reading a lengthy text dense with numerous facts and ideas, it is beneficial to mark things that you need to remember. You could also highlight them so that they stand out visually. These markings and highlights then can be used for reviewing and remembering. Keep in mind that you should mark only the most important ideas and information like the topic, the thesis statement, the main idea details like the date or names, and even statements that differ from the main idea and points or words that are difficult to understand. Previewing Previewing a text and marking it with pencils is better as changes can be made later if necessary. Marking can be done in different ways. You can try any of these or even develop your personal style by combining many of these. Underlining with pencil, circling the words or putting them in the box, drawing arrows, writing the keywords, date and names in the margin, putting a question or exclamation mark to express your reaction, numbering points in a series, making a star in the margin against an important point, writing questions. Forming questions after marking the text is a powerful strategy to reinforce learning. Writing down these questions helps us to sharpen our understanding. You can make questions using the title, headings, and subheadings and quiz questions on the text. These are also called reading response questions. A few examples for you to follow are: what is the paragraph about? What is the meaning of this phrase? What is the key idea in this passage? What is my existing knowledge about this topic? Why is this example important? How does the title justify the theme? Associating graphics with ideas. Graphs, charts, tables, diagrams are often used in textbook, articles, newspapers to illustrate a point. One should always study these graphics carefully and connect them to the relevant part of the text. You can also use drawing or sketching for better understanding of what you read. They facilitate visualization. For instance, after reading an article, you can draw a flowchart or diagram to capture main ideas. Next, number 4 is summarizing a paragraph or chapter. In order to remember important ideas presented in a text, rewriting the major parts in short form, the reports using some keywords from the text and the paraphrasing is very useful. It is especially beneficial for memorizing important information for exams. The first step in writing a summary is first write one sentence summary of each passage and then combine them to compose the summary of the entire passage. Pay attention to the topic sentence as it often contains the important details. Don't forget to include the main idea and all these supporting facts. Do not put extra or additional facts, ideas or opinions that are not mentioned in the paragraph into the summary. Students usually find summarizing a book chapter somewhat easier than summarizing article or essay. It is because the text of a book chapter is often divided into sections and subsections. While reading, one must pay a lot of attention to the introduction to the chapter as it contains this is statement and directions about how will it structurally and thematically organized. The headings and subheadings usually correspond to the key ideas mentioned in the statements of purpose. Textbook sections are often arranged in listening patterns. A point note here is that a textbook passage contains complex ideas which are difficult to capture in one sentence. Then one can make more sentences but should try to be as concise as possible. Critical reading. Critical reading means taking judicious means being judicious about what you are reading by exercising your judgment and not taking the information at the value. The word critical does not imply being dismissive of any idea or information as flawed or faulty. In academic sense, it means evaluating the text not just by assessing author's opinion and interpretation but also looking for omissions, inconsistencies and oversights in the flow of arguments. The first objective of any reading is obviously to understand accurately the content, but it is also essential for students to be able to read critically and analytically by establishing correlation between several ideas contained in the text beyond the superficial order. To identify author's purpose and tone, to make accurate inferences about author's opinion and make judgment about the validity of facts presented. A good critical reader is able to paraphrase the key points in one's own words, compare and contrast the ideas with other related materials, and present a full analysis of the text. The ability to read critically as crucial the ability to read critically is crucial these days, as the intonation available in print or on web is not necessarily true. This is especially relevant when you consider information on the web, because anyone can create a website and put information on internet. Thus asking question in order to check the validity of the text and to ensure the credentials of the writer is important. Some important questions that one can ask oneself to read critically are: what is the source of this information? Is it valid? Is it based on reliable sources? Who is the writer? What are his or her qualifications? If it is a website, then it is open source like Wikipedia, the outline encyclopedia. Does the website belongs to any organization? What is the credibility of the organization? Can the information be trusted? What is the apparent purposes and intent of the website or writer in publishing this? Is he trying to convince you or influence you to adhere to the published opinion? What is the point of view of the author? What is your level of awareness about the topic, and how does this information compare with that? Do I agree or disagree with this information? For information obtained from the internet, one has to first choose the source. From many sites listed on Google and search engine, a lot can be ascertained about a website by just looking at the web address or URL. The sites that appear at the beginning of a list are the ones that are most connected with other websites. Pay attention to the word blog. This indicates that the web page progresses, opinions and experiences of the author. Other than verifying the sources of the text, one should also examine the text, be it from the web or in print form, from textbooks for the following aspects. Determining author's purpose for writing the text. Usually there are three main purposes, that are to inform facts and explain ideas to the reader, to persuade the reader for or against an argument by using facts or opinion, and to entertain the reader with narrative imbued with suspense and stories. The writer may prioritize prioritize one purpose, but when any piece of writing can achieve one or more purposes as well. In order to identify writer's purpose, use the following guidelines. If the text contains several facts, then the purpose could be to inform or persuade the reader. If the language is objective and neutral, then the purpose could be to inform the reader. If the language is strongly emotive with positive or negative sentiments, then the purpose could be persuade the reader. If the focus is on description of amusing and intriguing incidents, then the purpose could be to entertain the reader. Determining the point of view of the writer. Every author writes with a particular attitude, opinion, or attitude toward the certain topic. This is informed by the past experiences and background of the writer. This also affects the facts and arguments presented in the text. To identify the point of view, one should look at the thesis statement closely and examine the kind of supportive argument and made to commemorate the same. Recognizing the presence of possible bias where the writer may be favoring or advocating particular beliefs. Bias means disappropriate inclination, predisposition or prejudice for or against a person or idea. It can impact the reader. It can impact the reader by creating a limited or flawed perception. The words chosen by the author can influence the feelings of the readers. Thus, it is important to identify it as to make a fair judgment about others' ideas. Biased writing usually has the following characteristics: one-sided argument, evocative language inciting fear, anger, pity, or outrage, facts or examples stated only to support the writer's opinion, and contempt for counter views. Political, racial, or religious bias may be present in a variety of texts such as newspaper reports, magazines, even in textbooks. Reading faster. Reading quickly is as important as reading correctly. Fluent readers with an impressive reading rate are able to adjust the speed of reading according to the type of content and purpose of reading. Reading rate is indicated by measuring words per minute. According to experts, a reading rate which is less than 200 to 200 according to experts, a reading rate which is less than 200 to 50 indicates word by word reading. One should not read everything at the same rate. Ability to read at a faster rate enables the reader to read more efficiently, to extensive reading of books, and also improve reading comprehension. However, a good rate of reading doesn't mean that one reads everything rapidly without appropriate comprehension. It is not the same as speed reading, which is advertised on self-help books with taglines such as "read a novel in an hour." Instead, it means that one is flexible in increasing the speed or slowing down as per the type of material or the purpose of reading. To be able to assess what your reading speed is, you can use the following strategies. Checking reading habits. Do you speak every word silently, aloud? Or do you move your lips when you read? The effort to pronounce every word slows the reader. It hinders comprehension also. If you follow every word with your finger or pencil through a text, it will hamper your speed. Good readers often jump ahead for new information to read quickly. They move their eyes to follow. They move their eyes to follow their thoughts and note the finger. Translating the text into one's native language to make sense of what one has read also reduces the rate of reading. Reading chunks efficiently. Reader read in chunks. Chunks are meaningful groups of words or phrases that are easier to remember in comparison to a lot of unconnected distinct words. Reading in chunks also enables forming connections between various ideas in text. It is easier for our mind to process information when it is divided into meaningful phrases. Skipping over unknown words. Good readers skip over unknown words. They do not stop reading because knowing the meaning of all the words is not necessary for understanding the key ideas in the content. Moreover, guessing a general sense of the word from the context is usually enough. Reading sprints and rate practice through extensive reading. People who read slowly do so because they are accustomed to do so as a habit. Reading sprint means reading quickly, just like runners practice running faster to increase their speed. Reading sprints help us to increase our reading rate gradually by breaking the old habit of reading slowly. You can use extensive reading books for this. At first, you might find it very challenging and comprehend very little of the content that you scurry through, but with practice, you will be able to understand better. You can use the following instruction to do the reading sprints. Select a book of your choice for extensive reading and keep close reliable watch for keeping time. Use a pencil to mark the starting time on the margin of the page from where you begin to read. Read for 5 minutes, then stop and count the number of pages you have read. Now count ahead the same number of pages as you have managed to read in 5 minutes in the earlier sprint. Now read the next few pages that you have marked again in the given 5 minutes. If you do not succeed, then keep trying by sprint reading new pages every time until you succeed. At this point, don't worry much about comprehending everything absolutely. Focus more on reading faster by making your eyes move quickly along the page. You can reread these pages afterward, forgetting the full meaning. As you get better at it, try to reduce the time limit for reading the same number of pages and repeat the process. After a few attempts, calculate your reading rate, counting average number of words per page. Keep a track by checking your rate. Keep a track by checking your rate regularly and marking it on a progress chart. Steps to calculate your reading rate are as follows. Take your extensive reading book to calculate average number of words per page. Take a full page with little or no dialogue or graphics. Count the number of words in 3 lines and divide it by 3. This will give you average number of words as per line. Now count the number of lines on that page and multiply with the average number of words per line. This will yield the average number of words per page. Time your reading as instructed above. If you read for 10 minutes, then that will be the reading time. Now multiply the number of pages by number of words per page that you calculated earlier. This will give you the total number of words you have read on the counted number of pages. Then divide the total number of words you have read on these pages by number of minutes you now have your reading rate. Timed reading practice. Timed reading is reading passages against the clock and then answering comprehension quotation questions. To do this, first calculate your reading rate, WPM, words per minute, and then set a goal that you would like to achieve. Then practice reading sprint, but this time after you finish reading also answer the questions based on the passage. Then check how many you got correct. For this you can take help of your passage. Then check how many you got correct. For this can take help of your teacher as well. The number of answers you get correct will be your comprehension score. The objective here is to force your eyes to move faster on the page while keeping the comprehension score good. Something to remember here is that if your reading rate is the same despite several attempts, then you need to move your eyes ahead faster. However, if your comprehension score is very slow, then it's possible that you might have been reading too fast. Your aim should be to increase your reading rate gradually while not compromising your comprehension score. Your comprehension score should be at least 6 or more correct answers. We understood that reading is a multifarious mental process involving word recognition, language processing, comprehension and fluency, through which we decide meaning of written words. Many students do not recognize the importance of reading as a fundamental skill needed for success in any field and regard it as choice. However, reading is a basic skill that we use every day in a variety of situations. Also, it is an active skill because a reader brings a lot to the text in terms of understanding edge. Reading requires guessing, predicting, previewing, anticipating, and even checking oneself. Efficient readers indulge in intensive as well as extensive reading. They often do not read every word or on the page and employ skimming and scanning whenever needed. In skimming, we go through the passage to get the gist of the text. In scanning, we go through the passage to pick out specific information. However, for study reading, one needs to actively engage with the text to remember all these important details and ideas. Thus, for achieving these strategies, like marking the text with a pencil, making questions, connecting diagrams, sketches, summarizing, and paraphrasing, are very useful. In this unit, we have also learned about critical reading and its importance. The word critical does not imply being dismissive of any ideal or information as flawed or faulty. On the contrary, it means reading the text judiciously to assess the author's opinion, bias, or oversights. It also involves judging the validity and credibility of the source of information, especially if the content is taken from an internet resource. Lastly, we discussed ways to improve reading's rate to read faster. Reading every text word by word slows us down. One should be flexible in applying reading speed. Having a good reading rate is important as having the ability to read correctly. Learners, listeners, teacher, trainers, professors and professionals, you are listening continuously, unrelentingly, unceasingly, unstoppingly. It will breed, increase your stamina, listening words. Your mind is storing the energy. By listening, by storing energy in your mind will be able to retaliate, will be able to return the same energy in the form of words. So, continue learning reading comprehension strategies. Comprehension is the most necessary academic activity in reading and academic discourse. It is one of the most important skills in language teaching. It refers to understanding of a literary or linguistic passage by a reader in terms of both the lexical and the syntactical structures, as well as the many layers of meanings embedded in the content of a passage. It involves the accurate association of meanings with word symbols, the choice of the appropriate meaning implied in the context, the logical arrangement of words to form contextual meanings, the ability to logically and rationally analyze smaller ideas and vocabulary segments, and the ability to understand the large meaning of the ideas contained in the content of any literary work. Reading comprehension can be described simply as understanding by thinking. To comprehend a passage, one needs to understand language patterns, to recognize the structural elements in composing a sentence, and to grasp the syntactic interrelationships of these elements. Comprehension comprises the use of two general mental abilities: the ability to remember word meanings and the ability to logically analyze and see the connection between verbal concepts, that is, words. Comprehension is a process of deep thinking and it involves meticulous reading. Thus, it is dependent upon the reader's basic cognitive and intellectual skills, upon their background of cultural and intellectual experience, and upon their language skills. Readers use their thinking and verbal reasoning skills to read for main ideas, for details, for organization and for appreciation. In traditional academic environments, a successful comprehension is said to have been achieved if the reader can answer a question or restate any information given in the passage. However, in the contemporary academic milieu, this concept of reading comprehension has been expanded to include recall, remembrance, application, inference, and even the reader's knowledge of language and context, syntax, and vocabulary patterns. This knowledge may be categorized linguistically into different levels. First is a phonemic level where visual or acoustic input is recorded into basic speech sounds called phonemes. Second is a lexical level which roughly corresponds to words or verbal patterns. Third is syntactic level which includes a set of rules that specify the process and methods of categories of word groups. Fourth, a semantic level which specifies the process and ways of sentence construction and patterns of sentence structure. The meaning of a sentence is not simply the sum total of the lexical meaning of its constituent words, but also involves the deeper layer of meanings that may exist beyond the superficial. Fifth is a pragmatic level which corresponds to the use of the language in dialogues and social interaction. Comprehension is then interaction with the text on multiple levels, both linguistic and literary. It is a reader's response to a passage. It demonstrates his or her level of interaction and involvement with an interpretation of the comprehension passage. It leads to a holistic and integrated development of the intelligence in an individual reader. Types of reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is the ability to easily and efficiently read text for understanding meanings and making interconnections between words and ideas. Lexicon and syntax in a literary for linguistic passage. It is the last step of the reading process after the acquisition of phonemic fluency and vocabulary. There are 5 categories of reading comprehension that may be taught in a language classroom. These are lexical comprehension, literal comprehension, interpretive comprehension, applied comprehension, affective comprehension. These may be explained as lexical comprehension refers to understanding the key vocabulary in a text. The successful comprehension of a text depends on the activation of appropriate content and background knowledge. This in turn depends upon the reader's lexical knowledge. No comprehension is possible in any language unless the reader has a foreknowledge of the lexicon and also a basic understanding of the syntactical patterns. If this is lacking, then the reader will not be able to read accurately and appropriately, and therefore the impetus of the passage will be lost, since it will not have the desired impact upon the reader. The essence of the exercise of the comprehension will be lost. Therefore, an awareness and knowledge of lexicon is fundamental to attaining skill in comprehension. Literal comprehension involves two dimensions: chronological and surface understanding of the explicitly stated content details in a passage. It can include the perception and processing of factual information, the recall or recognition of the main thematic ideas, detailed chronology of the sequence of occurrences and events, comparison of language and content, appearance and traits of character, description, and the cause and effect relationship explicitly stated in a story may be regarded as literal level comprehension task. Recall would require the reader to refer to and furnish an idea or ideas stated by the author. However, recognition, on the other hand, would require the reader to decide whether or not type specific information was presented in the story. Recall questions are usually more difficult to answer than recognition questions, since recall requires generation of the response after remembering what was read. In contrast, questions of recognition require the reader to select a correct answer by recognizing it. The ability to comprehend literal information presented in a story leads to higher levels of the understanding and appreciation, and is thus important for the reader as a linguistic and literary skill. Literal understanding is thus the cornerstone of the comprehension skill, as it enhances the reading and retention abilities of the reader. Reading without understanding is as futile as understanding without retention. Interpretative, or inferential comprehension is the process through which readers infer, analyze, or interpret the meaning embedded and implied beyond explicitly stated information in the content. They understand the passage to arrive at a deeper understanding of the entire content. This process is similar to that of literal comprehension and involves the sequencing of main ideas, the understanding of chronological sequence as well as their application to the events in the narrative, details of actions, characterization, and a complete understanding of the cause or underlying effect of an action by a character whose subtle traits are calculated or elucidated in his or her behavior. This information is not explicitly stated, and reader must discern an underlying manner of meaning by trying to read between the lines to comprehend at an inferential level. In the same instance of inferential or interpretative comprehension, readers may be required to elaborate on ideas, and in other instances, in the contextual repertoire, to concretize abstract ideas. These ideas must first be integrated and then used as a basis for making inferences. Inference thus requires an integration of the content of the passage, which shall subsequently result in the creation of inferences about the passage for comprehension. It involves a combination of conjecture and explanation based on a synthesis of literal context, personal knowledge, intention, and imagination. Inference can take the form of either convergent or divergent thinking. Convergent thinking is involved in such skills as identifying topic sentence, determining sequences, and recalling details. Convergent inference causes the reader to come to a specific correct answer or an agreed upon hypothesis that may be verified through the data supplied by the writer. Divergent thinking, on the other hand, is imaginative or creative thinking. It is an inference that does not have to be judged as right or wrong. In divergent thinking, the individual develops an alternative answer, none of which is necessarily correct. but none of which is incorrect either. Divergent thinking is a synonym for creative thinking, and convergent thinking can be considered a synonym of analytical thinking. In a nutshell, then, one must understand that strategies of reading comprehension can encompass a variety of thought process, multiple types of thinking, and diverse ways of negotiating with the text. Applied comprehension. Applied comprehension refers to the application of the content in the passage to some idea or opinion stated externally. This involves understanding the meaning, the content, making external associations of ideas contained in the passage, and answering questions which are not superficial but analytical. This may involve drawing comprehension, making contrast, highlighting sameness, and discerning differences. For instance, a study of a fairy tale revolves the application of the lesson of the same to real life, the parallel of the situation to daily incidents, and the moral of the subtext as a didactic lesson. Even a fable or an allegory, when read with meticulous attention, can bring about a realization of the fact that this can be applied to contemporary reality and is thus universal. Affective comprehension involves an understanding of the emotional and social aspects of the content of a literary passage, and it happens when the readers have the ability to understand and establish a connection between motive and plot development. This shows the topicality and immediacy of the language, passage, and the intensity and rational ability of the reader. For example, the characters in a novel may propel the narrative forward by their actions, but in a short story, the situations may impact a character to act in a specific way. Both plot and character are interrelated in a literary passage, and thus the development of the latter is dependent on the progress and actions of the former. The moment this connectional understanding and linking ability is manifested by the reader, the comprehension becomes effective in nature. Strategies of reading comprehension. Comprehension involves both intensive and extensive reading. And these are dependent on several skills that may be classified as literal skills, interpretive skills, critical skills, and creative skills. Literal skills are used for understanding the surface of content information. Interpretive skills are skills that are needed to analyze the deeper meanings of the content. Critical skills are skills needed to compare and contrast facts and details, cite and substantiate arguments related to the passage. Creative skills are skills of summary, paraphrase, reproduction of facts by rewording, add, rewriting the content of the passage, as well as extracting relevant portions and answering questions based on the content. These skills should be practiced together to achieve complete and holistic understanding of the content on a comprehension passage. to enhance the skill of reading and understanding a literary passage, to analyze it thoroughly, and also to submit the express parts of it as answers to be evaluated. There are five main strategies that should be adhered to. They are framing content based questions, creating content summary, visualizing and predicting the development of the text, analyzing the textual patterns and structures, and finally, scaffolding previous knowledge with new concepts. A detailed explanation of these is given. Framing content based questions. Comprehensive learning in any literary and linguistic comprehension passage can occur only through self-directed questioning, framing content-based questions. Comprehensive learning in any literary and linguistic comprehension passage can occur only through self-directed questioning done by a reader before and after reading. It is the interrogative mode of understanding post-reading that can deeply entrench the information of the content in the reader's mind. Questioning has multiple uses. It arouses curiosity. It embeds the learning within the mind. It helps propels the exploration of deeper nuances in a text. Above all, it serves as useful skill for pre-practice of evaluation. Framing questions, mostly self-erected, can thus be a useful way of examining the level of the reader's self-understanding of the text by an exercise by introspection. Three types of questions must be framed for a better understanding of any passage. They are direct or factual questions, analytical or interpretive questions, and research questions. A direct question is based on the data presented in the content of the passage, and it highlights the outline details of the material read with the facts being explicitly stated. For example, in a fairy tale like Cinderella, a direct question would refer to the details of the transformation of the pumpkin into a couch and the mice into liveried attendants. An analytical question makes the readers evaluate and seek deeper meanings in the outcome of their learning and understanding. For instance, in the story of Cinderella, an analytical question would deal with the relevance of the story in contemporary society and would seek universal and topical relevance of the situation presented to a similar situation in human life in a particular culture. A research question encourages the readers to seek information beyond what is in the text. For example, in the story of Cinderella, the research question would be what the glass slipper in Cinderella symbolizes. These types of questions taken together provide a technique for holistic and integrated understanding of a literary passage, or in this case, a fairy tale. Such a technique provides effective because it generates self-interest and self motivation to obtain a better understanding of the text by imbibing the skills needed for the same. Creating context summary. Summary is the ability to encapsulate the essence of a text in a limited number of words. It deletes irrelevant details, combines similar ideas, creating content summary. Summary is the ability to encapsulate the essence of a text in a limited number of words. It deletes irrelevant details, combines similar ideas, condenses main ideas, and connects major themes into concise statements that capture the purpose of reading for the reader. In any comprehension activity related to reading a literary passage, a summary can be made by jotting down ideas and statements, underlining keywords and phrases, mind mapping of the themes, sequence of actions, or even simply attempting a chronological arrangement of the key ideas so that a sequential understanding is achieved. For example, in the essay of studies by Francis Bacon, a summary would contain the following ideas: the purpose of studies, their use in daily life, their abuse or excess, and their remedy of various diseases of mind, metaphors of pruning and other aphorism or Latinate phrases may be declared in the summary since they enhance the linguistic style of the essay and are not so integral to its meaning. Visualizing and predictions of text. The importance of visualizing the content of a text is immense as a strategy of reading comprehension. As they read the text, readers should be encouraged to form visual images in their mind as structural images or diagrams instead of mere pictures, as pictures have a tendency to fade. The ability to visualize is a key element of comprehension since pictorial retention adds understanding better than simply verbal or mnemonic aids. These structural images of textual progression will help readers retain, recall, and even predict the future progress of thought and action of the text through conjecture and educated guesswork. For example, if during the reading process the reader is able to form mental images of the Congo scenery and the forest depicted, the river journey can be easily visualized as travel inward into the Isle Creek. Once this is done, the reader will be able to see parallels in the river journey with the journey of life. With a voyage deep within the jungle as the voyage into the deep and dark subconscious of the human mind, the reader then will face little difficulty in making the symbolical analogy of the river journey within the forest to the journey of the human mind into the depth of its subconscious. Many symbols and many layers of meaning will be unraveled by visualization and mind mapping of the text. Moreover, the reader will also understand how the white man is a foil to the Swardi Arsat, how he serves as a triggers Arsat's realization, how even the settings of the island cut off from visible civilization is a symbol of man's existence. In the word, visualization will enable a reader to predict the Damelan will eventually die and that her death will be moment of epiphany for Arsad. It will enable the reader to understand the flashback better and also to relate the consequences of the flashback to the present point of crisis in the main story. Analysis of textual patterns and structure. There are many genres, styles, modes, techniques of narration by which writers organize their textual material. Patterns used may be in the form of cause effect patterns, problem solution patterns, or a descriptive or patterns. A cause effect patterns can be a series of reasons or motives leading up to the climax of action or resolution of narrative. A problem solution pattern may present the argument or premise as a crisis or situation and then submit various alternative outcomes and solutions to the same. The descriptive patterns is one in which the pros and cons of a situation are evaluated. Patterns is one in which the pros and cons of the situation are evaluated, described, and assessed. Understanding the pattern through which the material is presented is essential for the reader in order to achieve complete comprehension of the information provided. It is important to understand and analyze the patterns of a text so that the reader can guess if the purpose of the passage has been fulfilled. For instance, if one is reading a newspaper report or a journalistic article, it is imperative that one should note the different headings, subheadings, captions, and also study the tables, charts, statistical data mentioned. Readers must also note the concise, pithy, and balanced sentence structure and analytical content presented as substantiation, cause effect, or even narrative input. In any commercial report, the data presented will be different from that presented in the newspaper report. Similarly, an article in a magazine will be different from an editorial in a newspaper. The tone of a scholarly discourse will be radically opposite to that of a subjective perspective on the same topic. Readers can plan their understanding better once they have discerned the textual pattern and structure of a text in a comprehension passage. For instance, the pattern of a functional prose passage is very different from that of a non-fictional passage, and both in turn are very different from that of a journalistic passage. A commercial report, a newspaper article, a blog, or a review. Scaffolding old knowledge with new concepts. Scaffolding old knowledge with new concepts. Brainstorming is vital for reading and understanding any passage or any topic. It serves to stimulate a reader's previous knowledge of the ideas contained in the passage given for comprehension. A memory of a similar text, if activated, will make the reader's understanding better and deeper. This will help them connect the present content being read to their already existing knowledge and make the new reading more stimulating and engaging. The strategy allows readers to work their way up from an already existing scheme instead of starting a new one. Thus, it is useful to activate prior knowledge and use it to support the embedded structures of knowledge within the reader, thereby creating a support for the new knowledge to be acquired through fresh comprehension and new reading. For instance, in any passage related to environmental studies, one can always activate prior knowledge of biology, geography, and maybe even economics as a means of reading deeply into the passage given. Thus, even before one has started reading the passage, one is aware of embedded knowledge about pollution, energy, economic policies, geographical changes, and other minute details that may have a bearing upon the topic of environmental studies given for reading. This will be the scaffold or embedded spot of the new knowledge of the details given in the content of the main passage. Thus, in the substructure of prior knowledge, the superstructure of the new knowledge and understanding will be built, and the finished intellectual edifice will be strong and deep-seated. Scaffolding old knowledge with new concept. Skills for reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is a skill that may be innate but can also be acquired through various strategies imbibed in the course of reading and polished with continuous practice. The acquisition of reading comprehension skills has myriad importance in academic and personal life, and mastery over this skill can be attained through various practices like decoding, fluency, vocabulary enhancement, and sentence construction, retention and attention span development, among many others. Decoding words. Decoding is a vital step in the reading process, and this skill is employed to understand words which a reader may have heard before but never read or spelt. This is the first step of comprehension. The ability to express and understand words which are unfamiliar or only partly familiar is the basis for other reading skills. Decoding is inextricably interlinked with phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness enables readers to hear individual sounds in words as well as to enable them to combine different phonemes into creating new words. Decoding also involves the skills of connecting individual sounds to letters. Words can only be pronounced and then spelled correctly if the reader has made a connection between letter or group of letters and the sounds they typically make. Fluency in reading. Fluency involves the immediate recognition of sounds and words which may be either familiar or unfamiliar to the reader. Fluency accelerates the pace at which readers can read and understand the text. Decoding every word may be both tedious and time consuming, and this is where the sub-skilled set of word recognition is used for immediate recognition of complete words by silent reading instead of sounding them out. Fluent readers can read smoothly and swiftly, skimming and scanning for words and understanding meaning in the content as they read. They group words together to aid in the understanding of the meaning, and they use the appropriate diction and tone of their voice when reading aloud. Reading fluency is one of the most essential skills for accuracy in reading comprehension. The understanding of the content depends largely on the ability to read with fluency and speed. Building vocabulary. A key skill component of reading comprehension is acquiring a wide-ranging and diverse vocabulary. Readers may acquire vocabulary through classroom instruction, everyday experience, and also by reading. The enrichment of vocabulary, especially by exposing a reader to multiple contexts, having frequent conversation, playing word games, and giving readers explicit instructions of a specialized nature in a direct way in the classroom can enhance the skills of reading comprehension. Vocabulary building must be regarded as an aggregate skill of reading comprehension. The repertoire of words used by a reader or familiar to a reader may be augmented by words in the passage for comprehension, and the only way to understand these words and append them to the reader's vocabulary is by situating the meaning in context and then adding the word to their personal repertoire for future use. Here also retention and recall play an important role. Sentence construction and arrangement. Sentence construction is primarily a writing skill, and in any skill of reading comprehension, this is closely integrated with a fundamental reading skill called cohesion, which helps the readers identify the formal and clarify the arrangement of ideas in a sentence. This is an essential and vital skill of reading comprehension called cohesion and coherence. That is the ability of the reader to understand the structure, order, and pattern of sentence and created a sentence. Similarly, by linking the ideas of a comprehension passage, this skill can be acquired by achieving explicit classroom instruction on the same and can be elucidated in the connection of ideas in the content of a passage. To imbibe this skill, the reader must keep an analytical and objective outlook towards the content of the passage while reading and also maintain sufficient detachment to form multiple perspectives on the content of the passage. An unprejudiced and clear approach towards the text can always be used to strengthen this skill of reading comprehension. Reasoning and background knowledge. Background knowledge is a must for better understanding of the comprehension passage. Reading becomes easier with familiarity of the topic, and the same can be achieved for foreknowledge or familiarity of the topics and its contextual background. Before reading a passage, one must activate background knowledge that may be embedded within the mind about the topic of the passage. This multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach to the text will enhance the holistic understanding of the passage through the scaffolding of the knowledge. Retention span and attention span. These two skills are both subsets of the larger activity set called executive function. Retention span is the duration of the time period in which the reader can remember the vital and key details of the passage after one complete reading of the passage. These details may be factual, sequential, chronological, descriptive, linguistic, etc. Attention span is the meticulousness with which the readers and read the passage and the details they remember during the course of their reading. While reading, the attention span of readers will allow them to process and grasp information from the text, whereas the retention span allows them to retain, recall, and even reuse that information to gain meaning and build knowledge from what they are reading. The ability to self-monitor while reading a passage is connected to the retention and memory span of a reader. Examples of comprehension skills that can be taught and applied to all reading situations include summarizing, sequencing, inferencing, comparing and contrasting, drawing conclusions, self-questioning, problem solving, relating background knowledge, distinguishing between fact and opinion, finding the main idea, important facts, and supporting details and substantiating them. These skills are particularly important for comprehending what is generally known as information reading or expository reading. Academic reading and knowledge in comprehension. Academic reading has different purposes depending upon the nature of the passage and the type of comprehension is required. It requires the varieties of academic reading are diverse and may include the purpose of obtaining data and information, understanding ideas and arguments, discovering the authorical perspectives and mode of narration, seeking evidence of their own perspectives, formation of new perspectives, understanding and knowledge, forming personal ideas and opinions, as well as building a wider linguistic repertoire. There are various strategies of reading a text, and these may range from prediction, scheming, scanning, defining the contrast between factual and non-factual information, important and unimportant items, relevant and irrelevant details, explicit and implicit realization, ideas, examples and opinions. The other purpose of academic reading may include drawing inferences and conclusions, reducing unknown words, understanding graphic presentation and pictorial representation, understanding text organization, especially linguistic and semantic aspects like relationships between and within sentences. There are four main reading approaches to the various types of comprehension passages, and these are psychological, content oriented, linguistic and pedagogically oriented. The psychological approach focuses on what takes place in the mind of the reader as he or she reads the passage and negotiates the meaning and semantic patterns as well as syntactical structures and lexicon. The content oriented approach focuses on extraction of information by readers provided they are given a comprehension passage in accordance with their aptitude and experience. The linguistic approach focuses on word and sentence in the passage, genre, style, rhetoric and semantic and syntactic patterns with lexical significance. The pedagogically oriented is focused on the implementation of learning theories which enable the readers to work at their own pace so that reading becomes a self-controlled, self-directed and introspective exercise. There are 6 types of knowledge in a comprehension passage which enable a reader to understand the text. They may be classified into general, generic, morphological, sociocultural, syntactic and topical. General knowledge refers to the knowledge of the circumstances in which the text was written and the content it may have in it. Generic knowledge refers to the knowledge of the type, nature and stylistic pattern of the text being highlighted through its content. Morphological knowledge refers to the knowledge of a relationship between a word and its structure, such as affixes and derivatives. Sociocultural knowledge refers to the knowledge of the overall idea of the content described in the text and its social implications and or any cultural stereotypes it may elaborate. Syntactic knowledge refers to the knowledge of grammar and semantic patterns in a text. Topical knowledge is the knowledge of the details of the text and its relation with contemporary reality. These categories of knowledge may be achieved by the various ways of reading a comprehension passage, such as perceptive, receptive reading, reflective reading, scheming, scanning, intensive and extensive reading. Receptive reflective reading is done receptive reading is done for enjoyment by a reader, usually in a passage of prose fiction. Reflective reading is done when a reader reads certain positions in a text and then pauses to reflect, recall or revise a line of fact or explore a line of argument or to arrive at a changed perspective. Skimming reading refers to a rapid cursory glance through the text with an intention to search for specific dates, skipping large chunks of information and focusing on select highlights in the text. Scanning involves searching rapidly through a text to find some specific data to which attention has been sought or directed. Intensive reading is a careful appreciation of theme, tone, language, syntax, vocabulary to understand the explicit and implicit connotations in a text. In Teaching and Learning in the Language Classroom by Tricia Hedge, Oxford University Press 2000, a procedure called SCROL is elaborated as a technique of reading for comprehension. This is aimed at using text to help understand, remember, and locate information. Using headings, segments, and introductory paragraphs or text for portions of a passage. The SCROL process of comprehension involves the following steps: survey, connect, read, outline, and look back. S stands for survey. Survey the headings and subheadings of a comprehension passage and then activate prior knowledge of the subject within oneself. C stands for connect. Connect the keywords in the first portion or paragraph or lines to make relational associations between them and also to connect them to the title or heading and subheadings. R stands for read by returning to each heading or segment or portion and mark words, phrases, jargon, terms that may express some important information, fact, opinion, or even argument. O stands for outline the major ideas in the segments to reflect on structure, perspective, and other relevant details. L stands for look back and check for inaccuracy in recording and noticing detailed and relate the same to the outline. Philosophy of education is level applied to the study of the purpose, process, nature, and ideals of education. It can be considered a branch of both philosophy and education. Education can be defined as the teaching and learning of specific skills and the imparting of knowledge, judgment, and wisdom, and is something broader than the societal institution of education we often speak of. Many educationists consider it a weak and woolly world, too far removed from the practice application of the real world to be useful. But philosophers dating back to the Plato and the ancient Greeks have given our area much thought and emphasis, and there is little doubt that their work has helped shape the practice of education over the millennia. Plato is the earliest important educationist thinker, and education is an essential element in the Republic. His most important work on philosophy and political theory, written around 360 BC. In it, he advocates some rather extreme methods, removing children from their mothers' care and raising them as wards of the state, and differentiating children suitable to the various castes, the highest receiving the most education, so that they could act as guardians of the city and care for the less level. He believed that education should holistic, including facts, skills, physical discipline, music and art. Plato believed that talent and intelligence is not distributed genetically and thus is be found in children born to all classes. Although his proposed system of selective public education for an educated minority of the population does not really follow a democratic model, Aristotle considered human nature, habit, and reason to be equally important forces to be cultivated in education, the ultimate aim of which should be to produce good and virtuous citizens. He proposed that teachers lead their students systematically and repetition be used as a key tool to develop good habits. Unlike Socrates, emphasis on questioning his listeners to bring out their own ideas, he emphasized the balancing of the theoretical and practical aspect of subjects taught, among which he explicitly mentions reading, writing, mathematics, music, physical education, literature, history, and a wide range of sentence, as well as play, which he also considered important. During the medieval period, the idea of perennialism was first formulated by Saint Thomas Aquinas in his work De Magistro. Perennialism holds that one should teach those things deemed to be of everlasting importance to all people everywhere, namely principle and reasoning, not just facts, and that one should teach first about people, not machine or techniques. It was originally religious in nature, and it was only much later that a theory of secular perennialism developed. So, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, students and scholars, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, listeners and learners, those who belong to the field of science, religion, spirituality, arts, commerce, engineering. I, Dr. Rakesh from USA. You are listening the truth of science and spirituality, availability, presence of the most honorable present Prime Minister Dr. Narendra Modi ji, availability of respected doctors and ministers, reverend fathers and mothers, affectionate sons and daughters. Even presence, 100% present sense of mind provide us the true Platonic word inside the thoughts. In the field of advertising, advocating, administrating, advising, one thing is very common in all, that is the presence and power of energy. If we have energy, if we have power of speaking, reading, writing and listening, then our mind start processing, recording ideas, storing ideas, informations, instructions, directions, knowledge in the form of energy, and that energy is stored by the waves of sound and from the rays of light for a long run. Likely that all the electronic devices we discuss ROM and RAM memory. So that is also the function of our mind. Our mind also has long run memory and short run memory. We have three kind of mind as per the thought of psychologist. One is right brain, second is left brain, and third is midbrain. Out of these brains, midbrain is the most powerful brain when we concentrate upon the waves of sound and rays of light by keeping the image of any personality, and that image or imagination in the form of light and sound, we concentrate on it, we focus on it, that helps the mind in retaliating, in answering, in reacting any question that raises in our mind. As per the Haradian Theory, we study conscious mind, through which we discuss with someone while watching and observing the things. While watching, not observing, that is conscious mind. Subconscious mind is that mind which is not speaking, just ready to react, ready to prepare and retaliate something. That is our subconscious mind. Something is not being produced openly, that is our subconscious mind. And one is that unconscious mind. That unconscious mind which is known as the midbrain. As per the principle and doctrine of the psychiatrist, if we daily do pranayama, dhyan, yogasana, according to our traditional and ancient culture, then we concentrate in the midbrain and unconscious mind. Unconscious contains unread, unspoken, unlistened, unwritten, unlearned. So it is the matter of un, means totally reverse. We can imagine in the form of dark. Not only dark, but we feel light in the dark. If we have the presence of Lord and God with us, then it darkness that is layered in our mind due to lack of knowledge, information, instruction, direction of the truth of science and spirituality, that can be removed only by the ray of knowledge, by the waves of knowledge. What is the true knowledge of the mind that can pacify our hunger of mind? What's that? That are the words, energy of the words, sound of the words, ray of the words. When we repeat the words, it creates, generates, activates, vibrates in the different cells of our human body internally. So we feel the presence of Lord in the God's word. Words are more important than the physical body of any saint, savior, caretaker, creator, generator, operator. His words, thoughts, ideas are more important than his physical body. We are recollecting, regenerating, reforming, informing by the words, thoughts and ideas that are available in the form of written, unwritten, read, unread, spoken, unspoken, listened, unlistened, form of words. There are different type of proofs and evidences we have of our past in the form of persons, those who are the evident, and nowadays in this modern technology we have digits, electrons, techniques that helps to know the past of any personality. So dear brothers and sisters, it is very important. Our present lies on the past. This was the same principle and doctrine which was broadcasted, appealed, advocated by Swami Vivekananda in 1893 to the worldly people by saying that return to the Vedas, return to your nature, return to your childhood. Means returning is more important than turning. Reforming is more important than forming. Recalculating is more important than calculating. Rereading is more important than reading. Re-listening is more important than listening. And Re-speaking is more important than speaking. Relearning is more important than learning. How it is important? Because it is the principle of storing energy, recalling our past. All the competitors, those who sit in the competition, in any kind of competition you are sitting, whether that is IAS, IPS, or you want to join any defense services, postal services, railways, in any other services that are required your attention, 100% presence of your mind is required there. In all these competitions, when you will recall your past, then you will know that you are getting success in your field. And if you will become satisfied with your preparation by sitting in the presence of your 100% presence of mind in the institution, in the classes, then you will feel this thing that you are getting, receiving, absorbing the concept of success in the form of positive energy, and you will become so positive that you will feel that you have become doctor, minister, advocate, advertiser, administrator, advisor, any professional you have become because of your confidence, because of your hard working, smart working, and superb of it. When you will catch your past, when you will recover 100% foundation of your present, then you will know this thing that you are near the target, you are close the target, and partially 99% you have got your target. Anything whatsoever you want to be doctor, minister, advocate, advertiser, administrator, advisor, any professional, teacher, trainer, professor, professional, then it's not an impossible task. Sometimes I have observed this thing from the school students, that they have learned the essay initially. If I were a doctor, if I were a minister, if I were an advocate, an advertiser, administrator, advisor. If I were means imagination. This is the imagination that helps us in recreating our past. When we recreate our past, then we know this thing that we are near our target, and we will get the salvation and emancipation from all the foundations, and we will be free. Our soul will get freedom from the foundations, circles of birth and death. Definitely and surely, a child who studies primarily, he is known as the judge, as per the saying of the William Wordsworth. A child is the father of man. How it is possible? Because of his present sense of mind, because of his complete rereading, recreating of his past. So brothers and sisters, our time is divided in three types: past, present and future. Three types of time we divide, and this concept is applicable for all kind of passages, all kind of sentence, all kind of word. When we think about the present of the word, then it helps us in learning a lot. Thanks your presence, all of you. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you.